Welcome back, everyone. Today we're doing a chapter review of One Piece chapter 1048, titled 20 Years. So let's get into it. So let's start things off in chronological order. At the beginning we have the cover story, which is a continuation of the Germa 66's Cold-Blooded Voyage. What is going on here is very interesting because we actually see somebody we haven't seen for quite a while in the story, which is Cracker. So we see Brûlé coming through a mirror to come and fetch Cracker and take him through to defend Chocolate Town, I think it was, that they were invading. We had a little bit of suspicion a little while ago whether it was actually Ichiji and Reiju in Chocolate Town. A lot of people throwing out ideas that it's actually from the Blackbeard crew, and at first I thought, no, that's more likely going to be just the other half of the four Germas that are around that area coming in to save the former two that were already captured. And because we got that in silhouette and we didn't really see who the people were, or are, I guess, we kind of had to make an assumption that it was Ichiji and Reiju, and I was very comfortable making that assumption until now, until we still don't see them, but Brûlé is saying that it's them and she needs Cracker to go and help. And that just seems way too obviously signposted for me. I know that we had the same thing from the actual chapter, last chapter, a little bit in this one too, because it seems we're going very clearly in one direction, which is usually when Oda likes to pull the rug out from under you and go in a completely different direction. So we're going to have to wait and see, obviously, like everything with every other One Piece thing ever, but I'm less convinced of it now, despite it being more plainly stated, or because it is more plainly stated. But that's what's happening with the Germas. So getting into the actual chapter now, we are picking up right where we left off last chapter, which is Luffy right about to punch Kaido, which is, only slightly behind where we're going to be at the end of the chapter, but we'll get into it. So at the start of the chapter, Luffy's telling Momo to get Onigashima out the way because he's going to punch Kaido. Momo is still hesitating with this, but then has a small flashback to his mother in the last conversation that they had, and how he will find some way of reigniting the Kozuki flame or continuing their struggle. And he seems to just get so fed up with his inability to do anything in the situation, to make the flame clouds, to pull Onigashima out the way. He's just so tired of not being able to do anything. He just slams headfirst into it and starts pushing it out the way, which is probably not super effectual, but it's a pretty cool moment. So we'll see where Momonosuke is going after this. So then we move into the Luffy and Kaido clash. Well, the start of the clash that we started last chapter. And Kaido says, very well, I'll just take this one, which is very brave. Not saying like Kaido would not usually do that. That seems very in character for him. I very much like his character, particularly for stuff like this. He's very much a warrior type in that regard. But he says, no, it's fine. You don't even have to hang on to me for this one. I'll just take it. I mean, that fist is only 60 times the size of me. How bad could it be? I'm the strongest being out there. So Kaido begins to provoke Luffy, asking him if he knew that the previous hero of this country was actually burned to death. He wasn't actually burned to death. He was shot through the head. But he was also burning to death while that was happening. Did you know that, Luffy? And as he's saying this, he starts to breathe out. It's not really a borrow breath. It kind of is, though. But he breathes out a whole lot of fire and coats himself in flames, which I thought it was very simplistic at first, where he was just kind of coating his hair and whatnot on fire, kind of the same way that you do with Haki. I wonder if he's adding Haki to this ability. Maybe it's a fire Haki blended ability. I'm really not quite sure. But Kaido begins to coat himself in flame. Kaido starts to get what I'm assuming is his final technique ready, where he becomes a big flaming fire dragon, and that never goes wrong. That certainly hasn't gone wrong within this actual raid. Within, like, what was that, 1034? That was really not even that long ago. It's kind of like when Pika coated himself entirely in Haki and immediately lost. It's just something you should never do. Virgo coated himself entirely in Armament Haki and immediately lost that fight. I think the only time we've seen it not go entirely wrong is when Jinbei did it. I think Jinbei did it recently, and he survived. He actually won the fight, against the odds. But King recently used his big flaming fire dragon attack and threw it at Zoro, and Zoro just literally cut straight through it and took him down in one attack. Which is the weird thing, because they move into their big fire dragon mode, this is supposed to be me ending the fight, and then they lose really quickly. I mean, Zoro only hit King like 3 times in that fight. I mean, sorry, let me clarify that. Zoro hit King 3 times after discovering his invulnerability technique. So he did hit him a bunch of other times, it just never did anything really. Kaido has been taking a lot more hits and has been really feeling those hits ever since Luffy learned the trick, and even since Law and Kid were on the roof and they actually managed to surpass his durability, as Kaido said. So it's not like an instant lose every single time, but it is so far. I guess this is going to set the precedent for every time. But we do happen to see that a lot. So what I first thought this was just kind of like an outer coating of fire, but then the kind of perspective that we saw on the chapter seemed a little bit weird with Onigashima and Luffy's fist and Kaido. It all got a bit confusing, but looking when we actually see Luffy still hanging on to him, which is where he's about to let go, we actually see Kaido within the flame dragon. So it's more like an outer shell thing that he's doing that's incredibly hot, as opposed to a body morphing thing like I originally thought. Now, I did a video very recently, I don't know if I mentioned it in the chapter review, I don't think I did, that when we had the last chapter, Luffy grabbed onto Kaido with his right hand and was holding onto him, and that stretched up, which was a drawing error, and we did a whole video, we don't have to go over that. But we can see very clearly here that Luffy's stretching his right hand, Kaido mentions it's his right hand, and we can see Luffy's left hand stretching through the fire dragon and still holding onto Kaido. Not for very long, but we do see it. So the drawing mistake is obviously still a drawing mistake because it shouldn't have been his right hand. It was intended to be his left. But Luffy obviously has to let go here because the big fire dragon is really, really, really hot. Like, that's got to be magma hot or something. That's ridiculous. So he has to let go. But Kaido says, don't worry, that's okay. I'm not going anywhere for this attack. I'm taking this one head on. Still don't know why he's doing that. I guess he actually wants the challenge from Luffy. I'd really like to see where Kaido draws the line on challenge and cheating. Like, I'm not really sure what's considered part of the fight and what's considered a distraction. Like, CP0 Mask Guy, who died for his efforts distracting the fight, that still hasn't finished. It actually just elevated the fight to another level. But yeah, Kaido says, no, you know what, this is the kind of punch I need to take. All those other ones I've been dodging now looked like they'd hurt, but this one, not at all. I'll take this one. So anyway, he's ready for that. And while he's focusing on Luffy and kind of getting himself ready for the attack, his tail just brushes up against the one remaining horn of Onigashima's, Skull Mountain. It completely melted it off, like in an instant, as he says, vaporize. And Luffy brings his fist down to challenge Kaido here, knowing and having a little flashback to when Hyogoro taught him about Ryuo. Which is great because for the longest time throughout this whole fight, we've been seeing Advanced Conqueror's Haki and the explanation of everything going on there, the fight between King, all of these kinds of different things, and Ryuo really fell by the wayside. At least it did for me. In Oda's mind, it was clearly still very prevalent because here it is being referenced again. And it's really nice to see it not wasted because we had that whole training arc with Luffy and learning Ryuo, and then he got to the raid, he used it like a couple of times, and then he fought Kaido, he used the Red Rock gun, Red Rock, he used that, which is definitely that kind of technique with the Advanced Conquerors, which is the whole point of it. And then we just didn't really see it again. Yes, maybe Luffy was using it in the fight with Kaido, so he was using Advanced Conquerors and Ryuo and Armament and Future Sight, like he's got everything. But we didn't really see it categorically stated that he was still using the Ryuo, even though I was kind of under the impression that he was, because that was one of the things putting him up on that high tier. But maybe all of his Gear 5 techniques weren't using Ryuo or the concepts of Ryuo in them, but now he is. So it's just really nice to get a moment where it ties all of the things that we did there back together, as well as all the other lessons that we've learned on Wano. So Luffy, realizing that Kaido's really, really insanely hot from touching him and seeing the thing, if he did see the horn getting melted off, but he knows that he shouldn't touch him, so he kind of matches Kaido's challenge and brings his fist down. And we get a huge clash. And the name of this technique that I've been waiting to see for like a whole one chapter now is Bajrang Gun. And I mean, when we got Gear 4, I was amazed that Luffy knew words like Schneider and What was the other one that we had a really good name for? Anyway, he gets a lot of cool, interesting techniques and inspirations for his techniques names. We have no idea where he gets them from. I don't know why Luffy would know about some monkey god that isn't him, but it's cool that he does because he can make a bit of a reference. I don't know where Luffy's learning any of these things, or if him making them up here is their first inception in the world. I have no idea, but it's really cool to finally have a name for what is probably Luffy's strongest attack currently, as far as we've seen anyway. So they finally have a big clash, and we're going to cut away for the emotional moments that explain why this clash is as important as it is. So we see Usopp, who's unfortunately dropped Kin and Kiku, but to be fair, he was washed away by essentially a tidal wave down that corridor. And we have a very similar moment here with Kinemon that we had to Zoro recently, where Usopp was saying, "Please tell me you're alive," and we just see a closed eye shot of him lying down. Pretty much exactly what we saw with Zoro. Now, Zoro is still alive. Chopper did confirm that, and the existence of One Piece the series means that Zoro is probably still going to be alive through the whole thing, but nothing quite so solid on Kin. The fact that we're referencing that same thing that we just did makes me think that he is still alive, and he's with Usopp, whose whole thing is pushing people to stay alive despite the disgrace of it or the loss of a fight or whatever it is. Usopp's just here to survive and make it through the day, as disgraceful as it may be. That's his whole thing. So I think that there's a good chance that they're going to be okay, given that they're with Usopp, but it's not looking good. Right after that, we also cut in with a couple of the people still confirming to Luffy, yes, it's okay, you can take Kaido down if that's at all possible. We'll be fine. We'll probably just die either way. So we're kind of apathetic about the whole thing. And after checking in with them, we see our Wano, our Onigashima prophet, Kawamatsu. I don't know what's going on with Kawamatsu lately. He's the device for giving us all of the information we need from Oda. He says we don't have enough water. Lo and behold, 2-3 chapters later, we have way too much water. Now he says nothing is over here until Kaido has been taken down. Well, what's going to happen? We're going to flash back to see why it's important that Kaido gets taken down. And we get taken back all the way back to Odin's execution day, which is a sad day for us all Odin fans, but it's nice to get another perspective on that and see what else was happening there. So this time we see all of the scabbards running away, and we're seeing it actually from Orochi and Kaido's point of view. At first we see it from the vassals, where it's just the gunshot. They didn't even get to see Odin die. They just hear a gunshot while they're sprinting away. That's heavy stuff. Very particularly strange that we cut in on Kiku for this shot. So Kin and a couple of the other scabbards, and then Kiku specifically before the smoking gun. That's a bit unusual. I'm a little bit concerned about that, but we've never doubted Kiku before, but I guess we'll see. We see just how shockingly terrible Orochi is, even from the word go. Just from the execution of Odin, he hasn't changed a bit. He is calling for the death of all of these people that support anyone except him and his overwhelming strength and his overwhelming rule over the country, whose name is Kaido, because even from here, Orochi has nothing if he doesn't have Kaido backing him. Without Kaido there, anyone could take down Orochi. He's not even a difficult opponent. I could probably take down Orochi. I barely have any sword skills whatsoever, and even I think I could probably get a good shot of killing Orochi. I'm not sure about if he has all of his heads, but, he's just a pathetic runt. He really is. And without Kaido, he's literally nothing. So this is where it begins, where he starts making the demands of all the people to be killed and Kaido to back him up so that nobody can actually say anything to him, because Kaido's literally the strongest in the world up until about next chapter, or the chapter after that anyway. But here it begins. All of the people of the country witnessed the hour of legends. They saw Odin at peak Odin, doing what he does, protecting the people of the country in sacrifice of himself. And they say, please just leave the Kozukis alone. They're obviously the good guys in the story. And Kaido's having none of this. He just beats that very man in the face with his Hasaikai. That is... We haven't seen a lot of One Piece deaths, but Kaido seems to be on a winning track here. 20 years ago, he hit that one guy who's probably stone cold dead. And a couple chapters ago, he hit Mask Guy from CP0, who is absolutely dead. I would be amazed to see him walking around. But he just kind of starts beating on the crowd and leaving to go and take down the Kozukis, burn down their castle, and kill the last of their line. Which we know doesn't happen, even though they say it's all confirmed here, but this is exactly why we're talking about this. This is what Luffy is here fighting for. The new rules, laws, and the oppression that is set into Wano for the past 20 years is exactly what Luffy has been fighting. The people that are so broken down and starved and enslaved that they're taking their own lives in lack of a hope of anything better that could ever occur to them. The only thing they've really got to hold on to over those 20 years are Toki's words, Toki's prophecy, which most of them didn't believe anyway. So this is really what Oda is doing. The same thing he does when we revisited everything just before we took down Doflamingo. The same thing we revisited just before we took down Crocodile. All the people afflicted and all the people that are suffering because of this evil, evil man about to be taken out by Luffy, even though it's the last thing that the evil guy could ever see coming. That's exactly what's about to happen. And this is the moment where it's most likely for us to get a big, big twist. I know I said that in the last chapter. It's kind of the same moment. We've not even elapsed 3 seconds since the last chapter, really. But this is the big moment that either is Luffy's big triumphant punch on the bad guy that's just going to take him out once and for all, or at least for now, or it's the prime moment for something hugely unexpected to happen. But I think I'm just going to go with Kaido's about to be taken down. Flashback time, maybe a little bit of cutting between, just because I think Oda's OCD and mine are on the same page, that 1050 is a nice number to take down the Emperor. Let's do that rather. So I think we're going to have a little bit of time being taken up in the next chapter, 1049, and then I think we're going to get Kaido's actual defeat and the big flashback that's going to explain why he is the way he is in more detail. So we're looking forward to that. But first we've got a few more things to talk about here. So in setting up all the things that we've been talking about over the last, who even knows how many chapters, it's like 3 years of Wano, 4 years of Wano, something like that. We have touched upon a few things later rather than earlier, especially with Yamato talking to the daimyos in that cave. We see all of the daimyo, well, we see the Udon, Ringo, Hakumai, and Kibi daimyo all draw their swords. So the daimyo give us the satisfying and obvious answer that we've all been waiting for, that we all assumed they would have been giving when we heard about this flashback before we actually got this flashback, in that, no, we will not serve you, we will not serve Kaido, we will not bend the knee, we will not serve any shogun that isn't a Kozuki. It's also really nice to see the guys from the cave, as well as Yasuie again. It's been a while since we've seen him, and he's looking a hell of a lot better than we last saw him. But it's also really good to see Ushimaru, and a full, just a picture of the dude. How insane is that? We've seen him from behind and from the side and in reference so many times, but there he is. But now we can see that likeness to Zoro so clearly as well. I mean, he looks a lot older than I was expecting him to be. He doesn't look like a carbon copy of Zoro, kind of how Ryuma and Zoro look like two peas in a pod. But it's really cool to just kind of be at that stage where we're seeing the things that have been foreshadowed instead of the foreshadowing anymore. It really tells you that we're right near the end of this arc. I really don't think there's that much left of this Kaido fight. I can't see it being more than the next chapter. It's the next chapter and then possibly a finish in 1050 because it's a nice round number. But beyond those 2 chapters, outside of flashbacks, I really don't see it. But they waged war against Kaido and Orochi back in the day, which is the thing that they should have done. And the thing that they did do, even though they massively lost, that was the correct call, is to fight in the name of your fallen lord, which is why you're even there. And Orochi does something so underhanded, I shouldn't even be surprised anymore. But he says, Kaido, just wipe them out. And this literal mythical dragon fish god is wiping these guys out, as he does with pretty much everyone. Even the main antagonist, even the main protagonist of the story gets wiped out by Kaido in present day. And Orochi just says, oh, that's pathetic. You're getting wiped out by that dragon god? We can't even call you samurai. Now, granted, if you lost a fight against, I don't know, the koi outside, or that one wrestling frog from Water 7, I could see somebody not wanting to call you a samurai, or it's a little bit disgraceful or something, but it doesn't matter who you are. If you go against Kaido and lose, I don't think we should be shaming you for that. It's brave enough to even stand against the man, let alone try and win or like give it your all. But the fact that Orochi has to come out and say, you're too pathetic to even call samurai, just, oh, it really grates my gears. I hate this man so, so much. The fact that he can be so pitiful and low and calling them out on something like that when the only reason he's even in power is because of that dragon god. And I'd like to see Orochi try and stand up to Kaido. Oh wait, he did. And he immediately got his head chopped off. So, I don't know. Orochi really is the worst scum who deserves the worst punishment that we can even conjure up. And I really hope that he just dies one of these chapters, you know. So let's talk about the death of Orochi. So it's actually pretty cool to have two flaming dragons in this chapter. We're kind of doing that twin dragon chapter again, but not really. But it's very poetic, if nothing else, that Kaido goes into this huge flaming dragon mode to become the strongest that he can and instantly win his fight, if he's fighting against anyone but Luffy, I guess. And I wonder if he developed this before or after the Oden fight. Anyway, so he goes into his flaming dragon mode. Right, this is serious mode, it's time to do this. And Orochi is also on fire and also in his serpent form, but he's actually dying from it, which is a nice little juxtaposition in the story of one flaming dragon getting stronger and one not dragon that's on fire that's dying. I think it's pretty cool. So one of the things that I've been very curious about for a while now is, how do you actually kill Orochi? I was thinking that maybe burning him or killing him in a non-decapitation way might just do it, to be honest. That his repeated lives, his live system that he had there, was more that it was because he was being decapitated and running out of heads. So I think I mentioned it in the last chapter. We did see him when Orochi encountered Denjiro and Kinemon and all the other scabbards back then, and they just kind of took 5 of his heads off. But even back then, when he changed into his Orochi form, we didn't get a full panel of all of his dragon head forms, which was very curious at the time and was kind of leading me to believe that maybe he didn't have all 7 of them anymore, and maybe cutting them off, yes, you can survive and go back into your Orochi form, but you will not have as many heads as you did before. If Oda showed that to us then, this would have been way too obvious now, but he comes out into his Orochi form and he only has 1 head. He's already incredibly on fire, so it's a little bit misleading, but he only has 1 head remaining. And he is about to use that 1 flaming dragon head to bite Hiyori and kill her, and I guess he's going to die anyway, so they'll just both go to hell together. And oh my gosh, shock, gasp, wouldn't you know it, Denjiro comes out of nowhere and cuts his head off and wins the fight. Now, yeah, this is painstakingly obvious from the last chapter when she goes, oh no, he's lost the nail and he's going to kill me. And if Hiyori was going to kill him, she would have just taken the sword out and killed him right then and there and be done with it. The fact that we got the shock, twist, gasp, cut away means that somebody else is going to have to come and save her, and who else would it be other than 30 chapters missing Denjiro? So I was very shockingly underwhelmed by this moment, because obviously it was going to happen, and I was still a little bit unsure about it because it's still Oda, and he very well may not be dead, because that's how Oda does things. But I think this is pretty definitively the end of Orochi. Why do I think it's definitively? Well, other than the whole single head thing and saving Hiyori again, the moment that immediately follows the decapitation of Orochi by Denjiro is the people sending the lanterns up into the sky, one of which being, please make Orochi disappear. This is another thing that I mentioned in the last chapter. These lanterns are incredibly important, and they are the wishes of the people, signifying the actions that people are taking in the raid. And this is exactly what I meant. Please make Orochi disappear. Well, Orochi's been killed. Please make Kaido disappear. Well, Kaido's been dealt with. What we are doing in the raid is granting the wishes of the people in the Flower Capital. The lanterns were a very interesting storytelling device to tell us or signify that the end of the fight has arrived. Orochi has died because the wish is going up that he dies, and the wish is being simultaneously fulfilled in the raid. And then we see a couple of extra shots, and then we see another 2 lanterns, or another few lanterns, one of which being, please make Kaido disappear, or please end this hell, or please save us from this, which is exactly what Luffy's about to do. So we have 2 very quick succession instances of, not exactly foreshadowing, but narrative storytelling that this is the event that needs to happen, and this is the event happening. So that is, I'm going to call it now, whether we see it or not, that is the end of Orochi, and this is the end of Kaido. No 12 more chapters of fight. Maybe there'll be a little bit more storytelling in between, a little bit of padding so that we get the numbers correct, but here we are at the end of this fight. This is one mythical fighter versus another mythical fighter versus one man 20 years in the making of revenge, cutting down the man that he's aimed this at this whole time in order to save Hiyori, the one he was in charge of looking after during that time as well. But this is really a good one for the title of the chapter as well. The 20 years coming into fruition really is the culmination of everything we've been doing for all this time. I mean, we have the culmination of Luffy and his powers and fighting a Yonko. We have that particular Yonko being the one-on-one, will always bet on Kaido fight, actually flipping over on its head somewhat. There were a lot of other people involved here, but we have the culmination of Luffy's story and everything that we've had changed throughout the story in terms of his devil fruit and his character and all of those things, and the developments we've had all the way up to here, even though he's doing the same thing he's always done, as well as the culmination of the 20 years in Wano, the death of Kozuki Yoden and the oppression of its people by Orochi and Kaido, the death, slavery, suicide, starving, all of these horrible things coming together over 20 years for this one point. And I think it's incredible. It really is quite a high point of Wano, and my first read was a little bit more underwhelming because of how Oda writes death, and you know, a little bit of it was very foreshadowed in the last chapter, so a lot of this wasn't very surprising, but it was still very cathartic. So a lot of things have gone on here, and there was some very solid storytelling going on. Some of it could have been, I don't know, handled a little bit differently in my opinion. The Denjiro thing was very underwhelming. I think we could have done that differently. I don't know, if we showed him more in between these chapters that he's been missing, it would have been very obvious where he was going. I think what really happened is he got sidelined because Oda knew that he was going to be coming back here. We had the fight with Kaido going on and Luffy and all the other things that had to go on between now and then, and if we had anything to do with Denjiro in between, we could have seen it a lot more clearly here. So I think that's why Oda was just hiding him in the background for all of that time. Unless he was doing something else very important, I think it was just narrative timing, really. But here we are. We have Denjiro finally back. I think I called this like 5 chapters ago or something, so it was a little bit early. But here he is. We have the end of Orochi, we have the return of Denjiro, we have the rise of Luffy, and we have the fall of Kaido. Very, very imminently now. But yeah, that was a lot of events in a very good chapter. There is, in fact, no break next week. We have 1049 coming up, and then we will have a 1-week break, and then we will have 1050. And I think it's a stretch of 3 chapters after that. So I think we're going to get a big suspenseful moment at the end of this one. I don't think Kaido's going down next chapter. Fully ready to be wrong on that one. But I think we're going to have the end of that fight, or the very, very near end of that fight, at the end of a couple of more wrapped up things. Then we're going to have a 2-week break, and then we're going to have 3 full chapters to kind of really lean in and see what else is happening in the story, or cut away to somewhere else in the world. But other than all these notes here that I've completely ignored throughout this video, it's fine. I can always make a subsequent video. It's a little bit later, this one, that I would have liked it to be, but I've been quite busy over the last few days. Usually quite busy anyway. But yeah, it's good to get another video up. If there's anything I missed, I will just make a subsequent shorter video or include it in one of the next videos before or during the next chapter review. It's a great series to talk about, and it's really such a wonderful time to be a One Piece fan. There's so many huge things going on. It's also a great time for a reread or a rewatch if you haven't started doing that recently, or if you've never done that before. I've recently finished the Alabasta arc, and we are now on Skypiea. Skypiea is phenomenal with all the context of what we're getting now in One Piece, so I highly recommend you go and either give it a reread or a rewatch, or both. Do it side by side, why not? It's just a phenomenal time to be a One Piece fan. It's a great time to be in the community. It's a great time to be in theories. And it's a great time to be a fan of Luffy. So on that note, I will see you next week. I hope you have a wonderful time ahead, and I'll see you on the next chapter review. Cheers.